All right, so we're diving into something that's been all over the news lately.
Hmm.
The Conor McGregor trial.
Yeah. Big story.
Huge. Now, most people know him from the UFC, right? I mean, he's a superstar fighter, kind of known for, well, being outspoken too.
Oh, yeah.
But look, this deep dive, it's not about sports. It's something much more serious. It's about, well, a woman accused him of sexual assault, and
Right.
this whole thing ended up in a civil trial.
This happened back in 2018, actually, in a hotel room
Hmm.
in Dublin.
Right.
And what's interesting here is this wasn't a criminal trial. It never got to that point.
So the Irish prosecutors, they just decided not to file charges, or?
Yeah, they felt they didn't have enough evidence to go forward with a criminal case.
Okay, so let's get into the accusations themselves.
Yeah.
What did the woman say happened?
Well, she claimed she met McGregor at a Christmas party, ended up at his penthouse suite at a Dublin hotel,
Okay.
and that's where she says the assault took place.
So she testified in court, and I mean, from what I read, it was just incredibly emotional.
Yeah. She even had to take breaks while describing what she says happened.
I can only imagine.
It must have been just awful.
Yeah. She accused him of choking her, to the point, she said, where she thought he was going to kill her. And there was also the allegation that he actually threatens to kill her.
Oh, wow. And a paramedic who treated her the next day testified about the extent of her injuries.
Right.
Said she had really severe bruising, like it wasn't just a little scrape or something. The paramedic said they'd never seen anything like it before.
I mean, that definitely lends credibility to her claims, right? But it's really important to remember, with a civil trial, things are different from a criminal trial.
Right. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt.
Exactly. The jury doesn't need to be absolutely certain. What they have to decide is what's more likely to have happened, based on what they call the balance of probabilities.
So basically, whose story is more believable?
Yeah, pretty much. So it's a lower bar to clear than in a criminal case.
Right, right. Okay, so what about McGregor? What was his side of the story? He denies everything, all of it. He said they did have sex, but that it was consensual.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he described it as, let me see if I remember exactly, athletic and vigorous, but not rough. And he was adamant that she never said no, never indicated she wanted him to stop.
I mean, his lawyer really urged the jury to put aside any personal feelings they might have about McGregor, like whether they like him or not, just focus on the facts. But in the end, the jury sided with the woman.
Yeah, they did. They found him liable for assault.
So what does liable actually mean in this context?
It basically means legally responsible. So the jury believed, based on the evidence, that more likely than not, he did assault her.
Oh, okay.
And because of that, they awarded her damages, almost $250,000.
Which is like $257,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's not insignificant. So he loses the case, has to pay damages, reputation takes a hit. How did McGregor react to all of this? Not well. He said right away that he's going to appeal. And he's sticking to his story. He claims that the jury didn't get to hear all the evidence that was reviewed by the prosecutors even. He's maintaining his innocence.
Yeah, knowing McGregor, he's going to fight this tooth and nail.
Oh, absolutely. But, you know, it's also important to remember the woman at the center of this, she stood outside the court and she gave this statement. Really powerful. She talked about finally being able to move on with her life and how she wants to show her daughter that justice can be served.
That's incredibly brave of her. I mean, just to speak out at all under those circumstances.
Yeah, and you could just tell from the few words she spoke how much this had taken a toll on her. Just, you know, the whole ordeal.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard not to feel for her after everything she's been through.
Absolutely.
I mean, this whole case, it really shows how hard it is for survivors of sexual assault to come forward.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about someone as famous and powerful as Conor McGregor.
Right. You're absolutely right. It's like David and Goliath, right? I mean, she knew she'd be under a microscope, that people might even attack her for speaking out.
And she did it anyway.
Exactly. And, you know, it makes you think about how the legal system works, how it handles these kinds of cases, especially when you have these high-profile figures.
Right. Okay, so help me understand this, because the prosecutors, they decided not to file criminal charges. But then you have a jury in a civil trial finding him liable. How does that even work?
It all comes down to different standards of proof. So, like in a criminal trial, right, they have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt,
Right.
which is a really high bar, really hard to prove.
Yeah.
But in a civil case like this one, the standard is lower. The jury just has to be convinced that it's more likely than not that the assault happened.
So basically, the prosecutors didn't think they had enough to get a conviction in a criminal case. But the jury, in the civil trial, They heard the evidence, and they felt differently.
Exactly. And I think you can see why that difference in outcome would be frustrating for some people. It raises questions about whether the system is fair, whether it's really doing enough to protect victims.
Yeah, it's a really tough situation. And what about McGregor's career? I mean, where does he go from here? Will sponsors stick with him? What about the fans?
Those are the big questions.
Right.
Nobody knows for sure. There's no question this has hurt his reputation. Some sponsors have already dropped him, and I wouldn't be surprised if others follow.
What about the UFC? I mean, he's their biggest star.
Yeah, and they've been pretty quiet so far.
I can't imagine they'll stay silent forever. They've got a business to run, a brand to protect.
Right. It'll be interesting to see how they handle it. Do they keep promoting him like nothing happened? Or do they distance themselves?
It's a tough call.
Yeah. I mean, beyond the business side of things, there's public opinion too, right? I mean, can fans separate the fighter from the accusations?
Some will, some won't.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. This isn't just some tabloid story either, right? It's got people talking everywhere. Social media, families, friends, the workplace.
People are trying to figure out what to make of all of it.
And that's a good thing. This case has made us confront some really tough realities about sexual assault, about consent, about what survivors go through when they do decide to come forward.
It's a conversation that needs to happen.
Yeah.
For sure. And not just about McGregor.
Right.
But about society as a whole. This is a human story with real consequences for everyone involved.
Absolutely. And while this case has been everywhere because he's a celebrity, we can't forget this happens every day to countless people.
And most of them, their stories, they never make the news.
It's a sobering thought. But this conversation needs to happen in our own communities, at work, at home.
We need to create a culture where people feel safe, where this kind of behavior just isn't tolerated.
Right. We need to go beyond just reacting to these high-profile cases.
Yeah.
And start looking at the root causes. Start teaching kids about consent. Start challenging these harmful attitudes,
It's a huge undertaking, but it's important. And maybe this case, as awful as it is, maybe it can be a catalyst for change.
I hope so. It's definitely an opportunity to learn, to grow, and maybe to create a better future for everyone.
I like that.
So where do we go from here? How do you think this verdict impacts McGregor's career, his image, long term?
Well, I mean, he's built his brand on being this tough guy.
Right.
Larger than life, untouchable.
Right, that whole invincible image, both
Right.
in and out of the ring. But this verdict, it kind of cracks that, right? It shows that he's not above the law, that there are consequences.
Yeah, it's a real blow to his persona. And I wonder how that affects his ability to get sponsors.
I mean, that was a big part of his appeal, right? That whole image, the confidence, the success, the rebelliousness even.
Right.
But that's taken a hit now, and it'll be hard to get that back.
So does he double down on the bad boy thing? Or try to rehabilitate his image?
It's a tricky balance. Either way, he risks turning off a lot of his fans.
Right. And then there's the UFC, right? What do they do?
Yeah, exactly. They have to think about their brand, too, their own reputation.
You keep promoting him as one of their top guys. Or do they pull back?
It's a tough decision. I mean, there's the money, of course, but then there's the potential backlash.
Yeah.
From fans, from sponsors.
Yeah, it's a complex situation for them.
And then there's the legal stuff, too.
Right.
This civil trial, it might not be the end of it. There could be appeals, other challenges.
Yeah, this isn't over yet.
Nope. And it just goes to show, even someone at the top of their game, like McGregor, they're not immune to the consequences of their actions.
It's a reminder for all of us, really.
Absolutely. It's about accountability, responsibility, understanding that what we do has an impact, no matter who we are.
Well said. Yeah, no doubt. It really makes you think about how these things, they have these ripple effects.
Right. And they go way beyond just McGregor himself. You
Yeah.
think about the woman involved, her family, his family,
Right.
everyone connected to this. They're all dealing with the fallout. It's just a reminder that these cases, these aren't just legal matters, right? You've got real people, real lives.
Absolutely. And for the rest of us, the people who aren't celebrities or athletes, I mean, there are still lessons here.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, it shows that anybody can be held accountable.
Exactly. Nobody's above the law.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful message, especially for people who've been in similar situations and maybe felt powerless. I mean, this case shows that even when it seems like the odds are stacked against you, you can still get justice.
It also shows how important it is to speak out, to get support.
Right.
This woman, she didn't stay silent.
Nope.
She went through this long, difficult process. And in the end, she was heard.
It's incredible. The courage it took to come forward, knowing what she'd faced, the backlash, the scrutiny. I mean, her story, it's really a testament to how strong survivors can be
Yeah.
and about speaking truth to power.
Yeah. It's a reminder that even when you're up against immense power and influence, the truth can win out. The system can work. It should work for everybody, no matter who they are.
Absolutely. It sends a message that no matter how famous you are, how much money you have, you're not exempt from consequences. That's something we can all find some comfort in.
It really is. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the McGregor case, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away?
You know, I think the big takeaway here is that this case, as unique as it is, it really shines a light on a much bigger problem. It reminds us that this can happen to anyone, anywhere. And it reinforces that everyone deserves to feel safe, respected, no matter who they are, what their gender is.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And to our listeners, I hope this has given you a better understanding of this case, all the issues it brings up.
Yeah.
It's a lot to think about, but hopefully this knowledge helps us all move forward in a more informed way, a more compassionate way.
I agree. It's always a pleasure diving deep with you.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.